Another day, another story. Summary of the Portrait of a Lady. The Portrait of a Lady summary is a real story of the writer's grandmother. The name of the writer is Khushwanth Singh. His grandmother was an old lady. The writer tells us the story of the childhood that he had spent with his grandmother. The writer has explained his relationship with his grandmother over the years. He thinks about her daily activities and how she grew as a character over time. He mentions her appearance, which assists in creating a mental impression of her in the reader's mind. The summary of this poem will brief you about the life of the writer with his grandmother. All the beautiful and emotional moments are present in this summary. The summary will tell you about the beautiful relationship that the writer had with his grandmother. The theme of the poem. The themes can be interpreted as spanning many stages of the author's life. During childhood, the key themes were seen to be innocence, admiration, and love between a grandmother and her grandson. During the author's stay in the city, however, the two were linked by themes of separation and unfamiliarity. Finally, following his return from abroad, the dominant subject appears to be a sense of reunion as well as a bittersweet ending. The Portrait of a Lady summary in English. The writer recalls his grandmother as short, healthy and slightly bent. Her hairs were silver in color and were scattered messily on her wrinkled face. She used to walk around the whole house in white clothes. She kept her one hand resting on her waist and the other hand was telling the beads of her rosary. The writer thinks of her as not very pretty but constantly beautiful all the time. He compares her calm face with the winter landscape. During their lengthy stay in the village, grandmother woke him up from the bed in the early morning, plastered his wooden slate, organized his breakfast, and sent him to the school. The temple was connected to the school. She sat inside and studied the sacred texts while the children learned the alphabet. On their way back to the home, she used to give the stale chapatis to the street dogs. A turning point in their beautiful relationship arrived when they went to live in a city. Despite the fact that they shared a room, their relationship started to grow apart. Now, the writer used to go to the city school on a school bus and studied subjects like English, physics, mathematics and many more subjects that his grandmother could not understand at all. His grandmother could no longer go to school with him to send him. She felt upset that there was no teaching about God and scriptures at the city school. Instead, he was given music lessons, but she said nothing. She thought music was dreadful. It was just good for prostitutes and beggars, according to her. It was not intended for gentlemen. When the writer went to a university, he got a separate room in his house. The common link of the relationship between the grandson and the grandmother was broken now. Grandmother rarely talked to anyone in the house now. The writer's grandmother quietly accepted her loneliness. She was constantly occupied with her spinning wheel and reciting prayers, and she hardly ever spoke to anyone. She took a break in the afternoon. Her daily routine consisted of breaking bread into pieces and giving it to the birds. The birds would perch on her legs, head, and even her shoulders. When the writer was leaving on a trip abroad for his further studies, his grandmother did not get disturbed at all. Rather, she went to the train station to say goodbye. But she didn't say anything and merely kissed his forehead. Her lips were moving in prayer, her thoughts were consumed by prayer, and her fingers were busy reciting the story of the beads on her rosary. Seeing her grandmother at this old age, the writer was thinking that it might be his last meeting with his grandmother. But when he came back home after a duration of 5 years, his grandmother was there to welcome him back and he saw her celebrate his return. The next morning after the return of his grandson, she got ill. Although the doctor told them that it was a slight fever and would go away very soon, still she could foresee that her time to leave this world was near. She did not want to waste her time talking to someone. Her fingers were busy reciting the story of the beads on her rosary. She went to her bed praying and telling the beads till her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell down from her lifeless hand. Her body was discovered on the floor, wrapped in a red shawl after she died. To grieve her death, thousands of sparrows flew in and sat dispersed around her body. All the sparrows flew away without making any noise when the dead body of the old lady was carried away for the last rites. Conclusion of the Portrait of a Lady. To sum up, in the Portrait of a Lady summary, the writer and his grandmother had a beautiful bond between them and loved each other a lot. The story tells us how beautiful a relationship can become between a grandson and his grandmother. Thanks for watching.